Hi, everybody. Welcome to Culturama 2020, which we didn't think was going to happen. We canceled it in April, but then cooler heads prevailed, and we realized that we could not only have Culturama this year, but make it wider. So we have people from in the room. We have people from Arizona and Washington D.C. And I know that we have a large contingent of people coming from England. And today we wanted to just kind of give you an overview of what's going to happen, maybe take your questions as to technical things, give you some side projects that we're working on that you maybe access different parts of Culturama in a different way than we ever have before. And talk about how to start a habit of being creative, which is so easy to get out of, right? It's so easy just to kind of disappear into your house and prioritize every single thing except for that one thing that you love more than anything else, right? And it's wonderful to prioritize things you love. I'd like to invite you to turn on your cameras. You don't have to by any means, but it makes it more of a community. If you have a reason not to, please don't. But if you can, please turn on your camera. Okay, we should introduce ourselves. I'll start because I'm egotistic. My name is John Branningham. I work in the English department. I teach creative writing. I've been a part of Culturama since it was called Writers' Day, and I started in working with it in 1999. And so maybe Melissa, you.
Yeah, I'm Melissa, and I work in the Fine Arts Department, and I am much more recent to Culturama. We started working with English department in about 6-7 years ago, right? And joined the team. Yeah. It's great to be here today.
It's been such a thrill to have the visual arts as well. It's been just amazing. And then maybe Lloyd.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Aquino. I'm also a member of the Mount Sac English department. I teach creative writing poetry, and I was here to help John create what is now Culturama. We used to call it Writers Weekend back in 2008 when we started this whole thing. So I've been here since the inception of Culturama.
And Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert Peluso. I'm also a professor of English over at Mount San Antonio College. And now, guys, we're the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing, because that's part of our official title of the department now. We voted to have that changed, so that's very exciting. I also teach fiction writing, and I'm super excited. So thankful to John and Melissa and Lloyd for adapting to create Culturama to be this online immersive month-long experience this year. It's really the fact that we're sitting here on our computers right now, I think is such a great demonstration of adaptation and that kind of spirit that you have to have as a creator of art, that when you have a challenge that you find some way to find the advantages out of that challenge and get that, sorry, admitting folks, and find the virtues and the benefits that can come out of that problem. So I'm really, really happy to be here online with so many folks. Happy Friday morning.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think about I really didn't want this to end. I've got the weight of history on me. This is something that's been going on since 1949, and some of our participants have included people like Michael Torres, who's now teaching with us, who's an incredible poet and really gaining fame. One of our early participants, who was a student here, was Sam Shepard, and he came to Writers Weekend, and that helped to launch his career. Sam Shepard, if you don't know, is an exceptional, well, he's passed on, exceptional actor and even greater playwright. He's just amazing work. And he writes about Mount Sac and this area, True West being about Glendora Mountain Road. It's just an incredible thing. So we've have all this history, and now we get to continue that history. But as Robert said, Stephanie, you were talking about an idea of a mitzvah in the Jewish tradition, and when something bad happens, you get a blessing that goes along with it. And we absolutely have this is horrible. I don't want to downplay COVID in any way. It's horrible, but it has opened us up to new forms of teaching, new forms of learning, new forms of creating community. And so one of those things is going to be this. Now there are a number of things here that have changed because we're able to add. One thing I'm going to be adding, or we're going to be adding, is we're going to have I'm recording this so that we can have a podcast, and so you'll be able to listen to this. And I'm 99.9% sure it's going to be hosted on the Inland Valley Arts and Literature Show, and which is a wonderful podcast. If you've never heard it, you probably haven't, because it's mostly just me talking to myself. Now I can talk to you, and actually, and Thomas is talking to me as well on there, and so check that out. I will provide links as the semester progresses, as the month of November progresses. Also, one of the things I'm giving is we're talking about creating a habit of writing every day, or a habit of creativity. I post a prompt every single day with a writing prompt, and it's on the website californiaimagismgallery.com, and I'll show you that. I'm in my volunteer uniform today, and you can, let me share the screen. You can see it here. Okay. And it's, maybe a minute and a half, and I just give you an idea of something to write about. So maybe we should talk about the schedule, what's coming up, and what we're all most excited about. Maybe Robert, what's coming up that you're excited about? What are you really looking forward to?
I'm so excited. I'm excited for all the workshops possible. I've attended the workshops of a lot of our different presenters and guest speakers in past years of Culturama. It's always a fantastic experience to see what they bring and the kind of writing exercises to go through in those workshops. I'm really, really excited for those, and to pop in and participate and learn from as many of our speakers and presenters as possible. I'm excited to be teaching a couple workshops myself. One that's coming up, it's kind of thematically like the other half to the issue today, huh, John, about getting into the creative habit. This one's about the first workshop I'm going to teach next weekend is about moving forward with your writing. So it's like, after you've developed that habit, what should you do if you ever get like stuck and you don't quite know where to go or how to proceed with a project? I'm going to be teaching a workshop about that in 2 weekends. And then after that, I'm going to teach another one on kind of comic book, creating comic books and thinking about that even if you can't draw at all. If you think you have to be able to draw to do a comic, it's not the case. So I'm looking forward to working with folks about some comic related stuff. I'm just excited for the whole thing, John. I can't be excited for all November more.
Yeah. Well, talking about, if you feel like you can't draw, we have Melissa and the art department. Maybe you can give us a preview of what's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some great things this time. We've got our animators coming back, Ron Husband, who worked with Disney for many, many years. And he's done some great workshops with us in the past. He even teaches for us part-time. So he'll be joining us tomorrow. So you guys should come check that out. And then we've got a couple ceramics workshops, which I'm dying to see, because I'm going to steal. They got, for COVID-19, right? They got these little mini wheels on campus. And I think there's 72 of them that they'll check out to students. So I don't know, maybe there's a way we can work something out here for everyone. but I want to go check one of those out and throw with them. And so there's some ceramics workshops coming up. And then the very last week of November is where we have most of the fine arts workshops. And so we'll have some painters and another sort of animation-based workshop that week as well.
That's great. And I think writers should absolutely go to experience the other arts as well. It can only improve your writing. And I hope that artists come to the writing.
That's one of my favorite things to do, is go to your workshops.
As for today, let's take a look at today's schedule. We have this, which is happening now, and then Scott New-Creeley, who's a professor at Whittier College, and he is a former student of ours, and he's a specialist in science fiction, so he's going to talk about science fiction. And then Kareem Tayar, who teaches at Golden West College, and that looks like such a Kareem Tayar subject. Using daydreams, he's a wonderful dreamer. And then if you're interested in possibly writing for an income, we've got several of those too. We've got several business sort of programs coming up. And Ishan Lai is somebody who does that. She used to write for what is that Seinfeld J. Peterman catalog. And she was J. Peterman for a while. And right when Seinfeld had that character on. And she's written professionally for her entire career. Tomorrow we have several things to say. This is the first one. We will have interpreting, unfortunately only for one, Linda Hogan's. We will have captioning but not interpreting. And this is something you should come to every week. Prompts for Poetry and Prose with T. Anders Carson. T. Anders Carson is somebody who will get you writing. He is absolutely one of the most joyful people I've ever met. And I'm teaching tomorrow morning. If you're thinking about trauma, either capital T or lowercase t, come to this. It's not a therapy session. We can't do that. We wouldn't want to. But it's ways of making life easier through writing. And then Sunday, this is interesting. Even if you don't have, if you're not one of the people who's lucky enough to get a session, still go to that with her. You can look at how she looks at writing and how she helps people to revise. And that's our keynote for the weekend. Liz Thompson and Lynn Thompson and Liz Gonzalez, both of whom are just amazing poets. Make sure you see all that. Okay, workshop leaders. Is there something I'm forgetting before we get into creating a habit? There's something we should talk about.
Have a a notepad with you for all workshops, so that you're ready to write or draw or do whatever's yep, great. I got my notepad of notes. I love these yellow pads. Yeah, plenty of pens. I'm always running out of ink. I don't know where it all goes, but I buy tons and tons of pens. I buy like 50 packs of pens and they're always all out of ink. I don't know. Oh, Dan's here. Great. Oh, and so have, writing paper, have a pen, and something so you could physically, be writing out the different stuff of the workshop that you might not think it's relevant at that point, but maybe you'll need it later to look back on. What's up, Dan?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
Dan is one of our workshop leaders, as well, one of the Culturama leaders. I don't know how to say that.
I wouldn't say leader yet. I'm in the learning phase. I'm just watching what you guys do to figure out how this thing works.
and Dan joined us last year, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have him with us. Leader in training. I like that. Okay, so fantastic. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions? I've allowed you to unmute yourself. So if you have any questions, just shout them out. Does anybody have any questions about the weekend, about how we're going to be proceeding, about anything? It's the awkward part of Zoom as you wait for people to have a chance.
They want to hear about the creative habit making, John.
Okay.
That's what everybody wants to hear about.
Okay. If you have any questions as we're going along, jump in an appropriate space or type it into the chat if you've not feeling like saying things out loud. Okay, so why don't we talk? What we've done is each of us have developed living that art life. Yeah, absolutely. What we've done is each of us have separately come up with some suggestions about how to form a creative habit. Who of us would like to, or should I just start?
You go for it, John.
I will go first. Where did I put my notes? I put them over here. Okay. As I was saying, we often prioritize things above our art, and that there's a yeah, that is beautiful. I often prioritize things above art And the reason I do is a number of reasons. Number one, I feel that if I enjoy it, it must not be valuable, right? Because I have a kind of self-loathing that we all have, right? And number two, often what I'm writing about is really getting at dark places in the soul. It's really making me think about things and making me feel about things, which is exactly what I need to do, right? Just as a human being, I need to do that. So it gives me pleasure and it makes me better, and that's why I don't do it, right? That's interesting. I feel an immediate sense of gratification when I do things for other people. So if I grade a paper, if I make dinner, if I do whatever it is I'm going to do, I can always find something like that to do, and I'll prioritize that over this. What I find in those things that I want to create habits with, say exercise, the hardest part about me exercising, I have a treadmill and a weight machine right over there. And sometimes I skip my exercise days. The hardest thing for me to do when I'm exercising is putting on my gym shoes. By far, that's the most difficult thing, right? Just getting off the couch, stopping to do this thing, and going over there and doing what I like to do. And I like exercising, right? I enjoy the process. I watch bad TV while I do it. It's great. So it's that process of getting off the couch that's really difficult. And so there's a couple of things you can do to help yourself with that. Number one is to do it daily. Now that's hard to say. That's easy to say, hard to do. And what happens sometimes is people will say, okay, well, I'm going to skip a day, but I'll just do twice as much tomorrow. Don't do that. That's very difficult. Anybody who's tried to diet understands why that's difficult. Binging and purging is not a good idea in anything you do. What I do is I allow myself to feel guilty about writing until I've written one sentence. After I've written one sentence, fantastic. I've done whatever I need to do today. Most of the time, I'm going to stay and do more than that one sentence. But writing that one sentence has got me off the couch. It's had me put my gym shoes on, right? And it's allowed me to develop. I do not allow myself to feel guilty too much, though, because I don't want to get to that space where it becomes this sort of weight on top of me, right? And that can happen. If I take a day off, if I take a month off, okay, that's fine. I know that I'm going to come back and I'm going to do my minimum one sentence soon. Month of November, I'm probably not going to do any writing because I'm organizing this, and I might do a little bit of writing. And I've just got a lot of things like that to do. But come December, I'm right back into it, and that's I know that's going to happen. It's also important to write daily because here's what the muse is. The muse is whatever do you know what I mean by the muse? The thing that puts the goddess who comes down and puts ideas in your head. It's an ancient Greek idea. Well, there's a problem with that. The muse does not come. You have to force the muse. You have to say, "Come here, give me some ideas." And you all have muses. Whatever it is that you tend to think about a little bit, you think about a lot, and that becomes your muse. So if you're thinking about negative things, you're going to think about that a lot. If you're thinking about positive things, yeah, I can tell you that the five of us have five of us leaders have a very particular muse that's teaching. And so whatever I pass by, whatever I see, it goes through, how can I use this with teaching? Because whatever I think about a little bit, I think about a lot. You can do that. It's important to do that with your art as well, because every single thought you have, every experience you have will be filtered through that creative place, that creative window. That's a bad metaphor. I guess filtered through the creative sieve. You can't filter things through windows.
Now I want pasta.
What's that? I
want pasta.
I think so. Well, I always want pasta.
Yeah.
And so if I'm writing every day, that's the thing that becomes my muse. That's the thing that becomes the center of my life. That's what I think about. It's not depression. It's not my anger over some perceived slight. It's not the idea that I'm bored. It's writing, right? And so this, when you first start off, that's not your muse, and it takes a while. And so when I first start out, when I come back in December, I will not have thought about writing. Probably, I don't think I'm going to have much time for it in November. I have to prioritize. And I'm doing everything that I told you not to do 5 minutes ago. But I'm doing all those things.
But John, you're allowed to be human too. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm going to be. I've already got some notes going on this. for my workshop about moving forward with the habit. I have some things about what you've been saying, John, which I totally agree with everything, the spirit of what you're saying. But I've noticed a really interesting tendency, particularly for American writers, to treat the art life or any kind of commitment to an artistic habit like a job, like a 1940s greatest generation kind of job mindset, where you have to show up and do it and put the hours in and clock in to the clock and sit there, and I don't know if that is always helpful for all types of people, all types of creative types. If it does help you, then that's what you got to do, because whatever gets you results is what you have to go with. Whatever's going to get you work on the page, or whatever your medium is what you got to do.
Whatever brings you joy.
Yeah, and what brings you joy. And sometimes it's not going to bring you joy, and that's the point of it. But I love your point about the one sentence, John.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of the next step after that. Make sure you sit for 2 hours in front of your computer or in front of your easel every day. Like, show up to clock in so the muse knows where to find you. I think it's kind of counterproductive. And then also with the pandemic, John, people are feeling hard on themselves because they've not been doing their normal creativity or their normal writing or their normal art or whatever their normal habits are. And that's totally okay, because this is a completely unnatural, abnormal time of, global life right now. And I think it's important to give yourself a break too, sometimes when you need it. You got to be the first person to give yourself that break and let yourself move forward.
Yeah, and there's one particular place where I'm going to give myself a break. When I come back in December, writing will not have been my muse this month. And it's going to be hard for me to get back in and to write. And I'm going to allow myself to write really, really, really terrible prose. It's okay. I give myself permission. In fact, I'm hoping to write terrible prose, especially right at the beginning. It's okay to write terrible prose, right? I'm just getting in, I'm just starting to work my muscle. All my life, it's okay to write terrible prose. And maybe that's all I will ever write. And that's okay.
John can't be terrible if he tries.
Oh,
he
yes.
fails at being terrible.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, so I've got some more ideas about how to start, but I think I've been dominating. So maybe I'll let one of the other five talk for a while. You know who's a genius? It's Lloyd.
I was wanting to hear the voice.
Sure. I wanted to I guess start by piggybacking off of what Robert said about this idea of writing being a job that you have to clock in and clock out of and spend those 40 hours full time working at it. For me, that kind of thing doesn't work. I've learned that about myself over my 20 years as a writer now, that my creativity doesn't operate on that kind of schedule, and that's fine. Like John said, I give myself permission not to operate on that schedule. For me, my healthy creative habit is, if I give myself just a little bit of time to think about writing or think about something that I want to write, or I jot down a note about something that I want to put into a poem or put into a story or put into a character that I'm trying to create, then I've done something of value. I've moved forward as a writer, which is great, which is fantastic. While all that's happening, I surround myself with John calls it the muse, just inspiration. I try to surround myself with as much art that I enjoy as possible. So music. I read a lot, of course. Movies that I enjoy, podcasts. just constantly consuming other people's art, because in that process I'll be inspired, and I'll find things that I want to write about, and that kind of gets me going. I think the other aspect of my creative habit that makes it work is interacting with people,
and lose.
interacting with other creative people. Writing can be such a solitary thing, and when you're all alone like that, or when you feel all alone like that, the sometimes that inner motivation isn't there. My most creative peaks in my career so far have been when I've been part of a writers group, where I was expected once a month or once every 2 weeks to produce something new, to bring to the group to get feedback. And I knew, okay, I have to have something written, and it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to even be finished, but I have to have something written to bring to the group. That's my contribution to the little community that we created. So it's a little bit of those things, for me. Just surrounding myself with potential inspiration, other artwork that I like, and other artists that I admire, and taking satisfaction in the little accomplishments. You know, I wrote this idea down, and that's a great thing.
May I ask you a question about that? What do you think the importance of creating and joining artistic communities is?
Um, I think the easy answer is just inspiration.
Mhm.
I'll also say this. I come from a family in a community where there are other creative people in the family, but there weren't any other writers. So I didn't have anybody to really talk about my passion with, until I joined a writing group and joined writing communities, like this, like Culturama. And that really opened things up for me, because I could see that there were other people passionate about the things that I was passionate about. It kind of validated what I wanted to do. This thing this drive that I had within me, which before that always made me feel very different from everybody I knew. It's to the point where I was kind of ashamed of it, or unsure whether or not it was the right path to pursue. So yeah.
Yeah, I've always found that my writing communities have been absolutely vital for me. And Robert, you were going to say.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to. I wanted to share something about my family, my home life here. My wife and my daughter, we do art day. It's capital A. We do an art day, and we get together and we agree. Oh, okay, art day on Saturday or art day on Sunday. And what that means is that we're making an appointment, to get together and do our art in whatever form that's going to be. We're just in the same space, inhabiting the same space, both working on what we want to work on, and it's phenomenal. It's one of the happiest things. A lot of the times too, we'll also put in a trip to like a craft store, because my daughter does crafts and sculpture kind of things mainly right now. And my wife is a painter, and I'm a sequential artist, so I do comic stuff and writing and that kind of different things. So we have an art day, and we do like you hear about kids in kindergarten or pre-K, where they do parallel play, where this kid does this thing, this kid does this thing, this kid does this thing. And I think it's so wonderful what you see in those writers groups, or small communities like that. What you see, I think, is that we're tapping into something primal as human beings, that we have to have kind of like a tribe around the campfire at night, and that telling the story, listening to the story, something about having multiple people together really sparks the brain in a fantastic way that you just can't get when you're by yourself. But if you have multiple people there, it's something about like a force multiplier, like the creativity magnifies. And so the more people that you can get that are in that kind of headspace, you know, you can magnify it together and just let it ride and have fun, you know, and have good productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. The artist working by him or herself or themselves is a sort of a cliche, and I don't think it works very well for most people because it's very easy to get down about yourself. It's very easy to feel like you're isolated and that you don't belong here. What I like about Culturama is that it lets you all know that you absolutely do belong here. You belong here. You belong in the arts. You belong to a community, right? And Robert, I think I cut you off.
No, I had another thought with what you were saying. Sorry. The idea book. I wanted to talk about having an idea book also.
Absolutely.
My fiction writing students, I'm teaching fiction writing this semester. I'll also be teaching fiction writing in the spring. But one of the things my students are recommended to do is to get themselves an idea book. This one was a gift from my daughter, so I love it particularly. But it's a little notepad that says ideas, scribbles, and notes, and it's got really nice paper. And in it, I've got tons and tons of little notes for stories. And one of the things I like about having the idea book is that the page is small, so it's not intimidating. And the other thing that's important is that this is not my phone and this is not my work computer. This is a completely sacred space between me and my creativity, and it's not for other people's eyes, it's for my eyes only. And I draw stuff from here. And the great thing about having an idea book is that the stuff that I totally would have forgotten, it's in here because I wrote it down that one time, you know. And it could be a really good idea that you find, like, you know, a few months later or years later. Sometimes I'm going back through idea books and I'm like, that was awesome, why didn't I do anything with that? Like, it gets you sparked up and gets you energized. I'm kind of, I don't want to say if it's superstitious, but I have a big belief in ritual and respecting objects. Some people even call it an animism. But I'm really big in like having the sanctity of the idea book is different than your phone, which is like social media and email and work and all that kind of stuff. To have these special kind of set aside places for yourself, and it doesn't have to be an opulent thing. It's a very small little art object, but you respect it, and it'll serve you well. And what makes
I was going to talk about this later, but just because you talked about your book, I keep a different type of book, and it's here. And this I write mostly fiction vignettes in here that go no place, and also no one in the world is allowed to see it. This is for me only, right? Because not everything is about this. I allow myself to have a completely private space, and I write in it every day. I started doing that when I was 15, and I've been doing it ever since. With the best advice I ever got from a teacher, creative writing teacher, was in high school, and she said, just write anything every single day. I'm gonna look at it, and I'll if you do it, you get an A. And it's just started a habit that was absolutely wonderful. And I feel myself completely free to write whatever I want. Sometimes I'll take that off the page, but mostly not. Mostly it's just there, and it just exists for me and me alone. That way I can be even weirder and private than I am in public, which is saying something. And Melissa, I feel like we've been completely ignoring the visual arts because we're all self-centered.
Can I advocate for the phone real quick? Because I know you guys like your notepads and everything like that. I'm really bad about carrying around writing utensils, so my phone is my notebook, and it works great. So those of you who use your phone, I'm with you.
Same here. I use mine all the time too.
Yeah. So,
dude, whatever works, you know, whatever's going to get you the results, you know, do it. When I look at, for me, when I look at my phone, I have 1,000 different things that I think about, and like my art is one of them. You know what I mean? That's just how I process it. But whatever gets you results, do it, man.
Part of the problem is I'm really ancient, And so when I look at a phone, I get confused. What
You
is
don't
this
have a phone to
doohickey?
look at, John.
Yeah, that's
your
true. I don't carry one. But yeah,
That's
absolutely.
the secret. That might be the secret to John's productivity. I was just joking with John about this the other week, wasn't I, John?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you do as much as you do? He's really I don't want to say Luddite because he's hosting the international online Culturama festival, but John has a great capacity for protecting himself and his creativity so that he stays productive. Like one of the most productive artists I know, John.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I invited Melissa, and then immediately we cut her off. So
I'm the fine artist. I don't like talking as much. I feel like we're always the awkward silence people. But I mean, I agree with a lot of everything that you're saying. I feel sometimes like John, where I'm very ancient about the way I do things. And I've got my books and I've got my sacred spaces. But actually, kind of in contrast to that, one of the things I try to do with any of my creative outlets is not make it private ever or personal. It may not get opened up. It may not get looked at by somebody, but I'm really introverted and I really like to stay hidden. And so for me, this idea that I might leave out, here, I'll show you, this is where I set up to Zoom all the time. I do meetings here, every meeting in my garage space here. And I have a big 18 by 24 sheet of paper out on the table and I write notes, I draw pictures. I'm the worst student ever because while I'm supposed to be listening, I'm doing a bunch of other things. You know, if an idea pops into my head, I jot that idea down. And so sort of that idea is that I become less vulnerable because I put myself in this vulnerable situation. And I think that's a really important thing that I've learned over the years. You know, it used to be a scratch appeared on a painting that I did and I just couldn't get over it, right? And I was trying to fix it and repair it. And over time, I think I like that layering process, the fact that there is a scar on the painting and maybe you weave that into it somehow, right? And so like even one of the things I did in grad school back in the day is I didn't have a space at all, even worse than now. And so I used a little carport garage area and I just left my papers out there and it was a shared apartment carport and I would get rat prints going through the paint and all sorts of other, you know, whatever else, dust and debris, and then I just have to make it work, right? Yeah. So right now, even it's one of the paintings I've still kept over the years in my kitchen. Is this painting with the little rat prints going across so and a strawberry field surrounding it, right? What and so I think living in that creative mindset for me is what has made it happen. And it's you know, sometimes a hard transition from grad school where I had 24/7. I mean, I could live and sleep in this studio space that I wound up renting with a couple of other grad students, you know, and then now having, you already saw my daughter popping in, you know, having kids and having a husband, you know, so that transition was definitely a tough one to make, and into that full-time job, how do you keep things going? But I think job helps, you know, here I am also surrounded, this is where I do all my meetings. So, you know, we've got drawings that I'm doing for class that keeps it going, right? I convinced, that's my daughter's, she's building a dollhouse, right? So she'll come out here and work. And all the wood behind is because I convinced my husband, who's also creative but likes the music more, that he should do a wood shop. And now he's more into wood shop than I am. So now I'm integrated in that space, right? And so I think finding ways to make people live it, and both Lloyd, you know, you brought that up when you were talking about joining communities, right, and making your communities, and Robert, you brought that up with the idea of family. So I think those are fantastic things to have around.
You have the coolest garage ever, Melissa.
See, look at this.
How do you keep it so clean?
My husband got so into it that he built us those cabinets.
That's awesome. Right?
Super cool.
And all I wanted was a bandsaw out of it, but I got more.
You know, it's so funny. You mentioned, you know, when you were a kid and drawing, like you couldn't pay attention, Melissa. Was that what you were saying? You know, I was just, because the kids all have to be doing their school like in the home space now, so I get to hear Maddie's class when she's online with her teacher like every day, right? And it's so amazing. Her teacher lets her draw. They let all the kids, whatever, let them draw during story time or during, you know, whatever, it's to draw out the notes or something, as long as it's like about the story or whatever, kids, right? But they're allowed to like be drawing. When I was in school, I'd get in trouble for drawing or speaking or something when I wasn't supposed to. So I had a lot of wiring with my creativity and with my art, that when I was drawing, it was bad, or that it wasn't, you know, that I shouldn't be doing that, or I'm breaking the rules in somehow, or I have to, you know, I should be doing something else. I should be paying attention to the teacher. And this is shit from when I was like a little kid, you know what I mean? And so I really had to look at that stuff and see where those neural pathways were built, you know, of how I got to that place with my art. And so now I've been systematically for the past few years, you know, unwiring those connections in my brain to get to a more positive place with my art and my process. So I mention that because I'd like folks to also think about your formative experiences of how you got wired to feel the way about your art or about your creativity that you do, you know? And so if there's any places that you feel are you know, could be better, you know, why not look at the source of that and think about making more positive associations for moving forward.
I'm also really on board with you, Melissa, in terms of you said making your art public or leaving it out for people to see. I'm also an introvert, so that's been something that I've also had not had to, but wanted to embrace. I know a lot of people keep, you know, journals and everything like that. Facebook has become my journal, and I take it very seriously, even though I'm very silly on it. You know, I'm posting my silly thoughts or crazy ideas that I have for things, or just how I'm feeling in any given day, because I want it to be public, because it has to be public for me in order for me to embrace it. And like you said, be vulnerable, because that's such a big part of what being an artist is being vulnerable, and embracing all of that. So, you know, I know people talk a lot of crap about Facebook and how awful it is, and it can be very awful. But I feel like I found a way to make it work in terms of my creative habit.
Great. Dan, did you have any habits that you do that you can give to us?
I wanted to address something that was written. Somebody put out a message about 10 minutes ago saying that one of the hardest parts is just getting started. And I think one of the problems there is if you're looking at the finished product that you're trying to make, it does seem very overwhelming. You know, if you're going to sit down and start to write a novel, it almost seems impossible because a novel is so damn long. That's a lot of pages to write. But with me, the way I get around that is I set myself a goal. Every time I sit down to write, I have a goal, and it's a really simple goal. The goal is produce one good thing. If I produce one good thing, it's a successful day for me. That might be 2 pages and it might be 1 sentence. And in some cases, it's not even writing. It's just that I was sitting in my chair and I finally figured out how to get myself out of a corner that I had written myself into. I didn't write anything down, but I had the idea, and that still satisfied my goal. I consider that writing if I came up with a really good idea, and the next time, my next session, I've got something to work on then. So I think I just want to stress that it's good to have the product, the end product in mind, but also think of it as just a bunch of little steps to get there. And each day, it's just one more step.
Robert.
And Dan, if I may, that's great. That's a really great lesson to keep in mind, no matter how long somebody's been practicing the art. That emphasis on process over product.
There you
Process over product, man.
Mm.
Oh man, during my time at USC, I had the opportunity to study under Professor Mary Sweeney, who's a producer and editor who's worked with David Lynch. And she taught me about the art life. And, you know, she really emphasized, you know, we were working on screenwriting at that time. She's like, don't think about the movie of it, think about the fact that you're writing it at that moment. You already won when it's in your head, you know what I mean? And you're coming up with something really cool and you're entertained by it. That's a victory. It's you know, according to certain interpretations, game is over and you won. And then later, after lots of time and effort and energy, like other people read it or see it or respond to it or something, that's bonus. That's icing on the cake. But the real contest is between you and the blank page. And when the page ain't blank anymore, you won. You have that victory. Other people can now come in and see what, you know, the shadow of your victory or the remnant of your victory, but the victory is still yours as long as you're thinking about, like, I'm in process, I'm achieving something worthwhile, you know. So process over product, absolutely, Dan. That's great.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, Robert, that I've made it a kind of a mission over the course of becoming a writer to find a way to enjoy every part of the process. You know, I see so often writers, you know, that I follow on Twitter or on social media or whatever, and they talk about writing as if it's this painful thing that they have to subject themselves to. And I'm just like,
you're doing it wrong, dude.
Yeah, it's just like writing is
It's always
fun.
that way.
Like, I wish I could write all the time. That would be amazing. But you know, I have to pay the bills and I have to have other responsibilities, and that's just what life is. But when I was able to find ways to embrace and enjoy the drafting process, the revision process, getting feedback, which was scary at first, looking for a publisher, all of that, and just enjoy each of those, what do you call them, landmarks, those achievements. And it's just like, this is fun. I love doing this. This is what I love doing. Yeah.
If at some level it's not intellectual gameplay, then why do it?
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. Okay, I think we'll give you a chance to take a couple of questions, and then after that, maybe we could have some prompts to get you started. There is half an hour between this and the next session, and maybe more time if you're planning to do something else. So a couple of good prompts would be good. But does anybody have any questions? Anything to interject? Anything you'd like to know?
I had a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, this idea of like productivity, it's kind of like always there when it comes to like a creative process, and how people, like professional writers like you guys, like, how do you combat that when it becomes like negative, like having to stay productive? And I don't know. Yeah.
I'd say the number one thing for me is, I know I'm treading in dangerous water if I'm comparing myself to other professional artists, because I'm not going to produce as much as they do. And that's fine. That's okay. What is the pace that I am comfortable with? What is the pace that I produce at? And just kind of developing that self-awareness that that's how I work. This is how I do things, and that's fine. I'm not the type of person, personally, I'm not going to write a poem a day. There'll be times where I'll have like moments of inspiration and I'll write a poem like a week or excuse me, every day of the week. But those are kind of few and far between. And again, I just give myself permission to say, that's okay. I've produced something. It's like I tell my students in my creative writing poetry class, you know, if you sit down and you write a poem, no matter what you do, the worst thing that will happen is you will have a poem.
Yeah. That's a great outcome, right?
And that's not terrible at all. Yeah, that's fantastic.
You won over that blank page, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to continue on with that thing about comparisons, and I've got a lot to say about that. But also, it's also important to know that everybody, especially when you're dealing with creativity, works differently. So Lloyd's doing that. I have projects that I've been working on for 20 years. I probably have 15 projects open right now, and I'll just kind of bounce from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And I'm just bouncing all the time. I think it has to do with some sort of deep psychological scars or something. I don't know. But why not work with that?
I try to find a healthier spin on that, which is that each one of my ideas just needs different time to bake.
That's a healthier way of looking at that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes 10 years to bake. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. It really depends. So
yeah, that's a great point, Lloyd. And now I'm starving, so thank you for that too. But like the ideas. Oh, okay. I highly recommend a book if you want to get super inspired. The book is Catching the Big Fish by David Lynch. It's a very short little book with few, like a paragraph like on the page. It's very, very compressed. It's very, very fast. You could read it like in maybe 2 hours total, the whole book. It's really, really cool. And in there, he talks about the ideas, that we're kind of that artists are these fishermen for ideas, and you catch an idea and you don't know what it's going to be, but it's a hopeful little puzzle piece, he says. It indicates the rest. It points out to the rest of it. So how long it takes you to build something out from that puzzle piece, but you got to keep it. You can't, if you've forgotten it, you're never going to get to build stuff around that puzzle piece. But it could take, 1 week or 1 year, or one of my projects I think I've been working on for 10 years. One of my projects I've got going is 10 years, and that's not even Redemptor. This is a whole different thing I've been going on 10 years for. Things go at different rates. And the cool thing that I was reminded of when John was talking about the temple of the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece, over the top of the temple, it says, "Know thyself." So you're going to this oracle to find out something about the future. And the thing that it's saying, everybody who comes and wants to know about the future is know yourself. So there's self-knowledge there about how to get the life that you want to get is directly connected. Your power over your ability to make reality what you want it to be in the future is connected to your self-knowledge and how you know how to be productive with yourself, how you know to treat yourself, how you know self-care, what you know that you need to get the best results that you can. That's all connected to self-knowledge. And I think that's part of what's so cool that we get to do through Culturama every year, is that really looking inside ourselves to get inspired, in the community. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I want to circle back to that idea of comparing yourself to other artists. It's a really, really bad idea. I did this when I was young. I started reading Steinbeck's letters, and like he was my age. I was reading the letters when he was my age. What the hell? Why am I not as successful as Steinbeck? Well, that's a really bad idea.
John, that's your model? You wanted to be Steinbeck?
Oh, I did when I was younger. I don't anymore. But that was who I just liked his work. And
I think Steinbeck would prefer to be more Browning.
Well, I think it would be a mistake for me to try to want to be anybody else but me. And I became very depressed doing that. It's just a bad way of working.
I wanted to be Jack Kerouac.
Did you? Yeah.
I wanted to be Jack Kerouac. So what I thought I was doing was writing like Dulolas. I thought I was writing like on the road, like as I was writing my journal. It really is just a journal.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, maybe I should stop trying to be Jack Kerouac and figure out what Rob Palusa's about.
Yeah.
I'd be happier and not an alcoholic, and people would like me more.
Absolutely.
What happened to Jack Kerouac? So it's terrible. So, John, we have to talk about the tortured artist. We have to talk about the myth of the tortured artist. Can I talk about the myth of the tortured artist for 1 minute?
Absolutely. Talk about filmmaking.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that also. The myth of the tortured artist is that it's bullshit. Okay. That's the myth of the tortured artist. You do not need to be so dark and tortured by your creativity in order to be creative. Okay. For me, the most hardcore, kind of dark subject matter artist that there is David Lynch through his filmmaking. Okay. And this is a guy who is not sitting around with drug addiction, alcohol addiction, tons of what do you call it?
Self-harming.
Negative habits and negative mindsets, and he writes about this and speaks about this a lot, usually in support of transcendental meditation and why artists should consider doing transcendental meditation. But apart from that, it's the idea that if David Lynch cannot consider himself to be a tortured artist, then there's really something to think about there. And also a lot of the artists that I really respect and like their art, they are frequently recovered alcoholics or addicts. And I mention that because I think it's really important that these artists come through the other side of that addiction. And they're like, wow, what I thought was helping my art was actually hurting my art and hurting my personal life. And when I stop hurting myself, or I stop hurting my art, and I stop hurting my personal life, I find that I still have access to my creativity, but I can access it in a more pure, direct, productive, and joyful way. So even if you're writing about really dark shit, which like a lot of my students are right now in my fiction writing class, and that makes so much sense because it's the pandemic, even if you're writing about really dark shit, that doesn't mean that you have to live in that darkness. You know what I mean? That's a character that you're entering into and an artwork that you're entering into and that you're playing, but that doesn't have to be your reality. Your reality can be a very healthy relationship to yourself and to your loved ones and to your art. It is possible. And I mention this because so many of my favorite artists are these, bad boys or recovered bad boys or dead bad boys. And I didn't want to be a dead bad boy. That doesn't seem very good to me. So I really took that seriously, investigating that. And I love to share that with my students because when I was in college, I thought that, to be an artist, you had to be like some wild roaring boy of Rome, some wild child. It's not the case.
I grew up.
Great, Samantha. Yeah, absolutely.
I grew up in Long Beach, in and around Charles Bukowski. And I never met him, but I was part of that community. And what everybody knew about him was the moment he started drinking is the moment the writing stopped, right? He was not doing that drunk. You just can't do that. And his best work came in times when he was clean, which wasn't often. But it was.
He's a great example, John, especially in Southern California. There's always that what do you call it? The ghost of Bukowski over all writers in Southern California.
He's a great writer.
Yeah, great writer. Love a lot of his work, but I think so much of it's interesting because so much of it is persona, and like he built himself into his writing like as having that persona. And then there's the reality, which, other people know, but, writers coming and reading his writing think that that's how you do it. Like it's an instruction manual or something. It's like, no, man, the artists who are putting in the time there know that you can't be giving yourself to something that's not your art. If it's some other thing, then you're not going to get it.
And the truth is, there's a lot of fiction and a lot of movies out there about the addict writer or artist or whatever, but that's because the process of writing is not dramatic. And yes, there have been a lot of addicts who have been writers, but there are a lot of addicts who do other things as well. There's engineers, doctors, lawyers, whatever, right? It's not, and this idea that you're going to do self-harm in order to create art is no more successful than I'm going to do self-harm in order to become a lawyer. It's the same sort of reasoning. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Lauren, that was probably more answer than you were expecting, and it went far afield, but it was a great question.
Great question.
No problem. I actually was interested in hearing about the tortured artist. I think when I think about that, I think about Raymond Carver. Like that's one of the.
Yeah.
Which is actually one of my favorites since I read it the beginning of this year in English 1B.
But you know what? His best poem he ever wrote was Gravy. And it was about as he has turned away from alcoholism 10 years after the fact, and he's dying, and he's become so incredibly self-actualized that he sees his death and the life since his addiction as being gravy and beautiful, and he's not worried about it, right? He became to use bad psychobabble, self-actualized in that time. Right. And it's just such a beautiful, if you've never read Raymond Carvey's Gravy, absolutely read it. And if you're not weeping by the time you're done with that poem, you're a bad person. Okay, so good. What other questions do you have?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, Andrea.
Hey. So, okay, so I've been doing the NaNoWriMo thing. Since the first, I've been actively trying this time.
Great.
I've tried it before. I've lasted maybe like 3 days, and then I'm just like just stuck. Because I'll get a good idea, and then even in the middle of writing, I'll just have complete like writer's block, and I'll just stare at the screen, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna leave because then I won't come back, and I'll just kind of sit there and stare, and my dogs think I'm insane because I'm just sitting there. And I just want to know like how you overcome that, because I feel like you said, like your projects can last 10 years, but it's like that's part of the issue for me is when I get stuck, and then that's it.
Can I tell you a secret? I have strong feelings about NaNoWriMo.
Please.
Are you recording this, John? But I'm gonna. You could keep recording. It's okay. I'm gonna be controversial.
NaNoWriMo people are listening in right now.
Please.
I know. Okay, I'm gonna be controversial about NaNoWriMo. Okay, I think NaNoWriMo is great because it gets people putting words on the page. Okay, and that's the primary thing. If you're gonna be a writer, then you have to write, right? So what happens with NaNoWriMo is that they create this kind of sociological construct and conditions around the month of November that says, okay, everybody's going to be writing, everybody's going to be working on a novel at this time, and you're going to write this whole complete novel, you know, or depending on how you play the rules of the event, you know. But what is fascinating to me is the failure rate of this, you know, like, so people, and I put failure in scare quotes, okay? So people who don't accomplish the whole novel, or they only make it a few days, and then they're like, oh, I'm not a writer. It's like yet another reason to feel bad about themselves when what the point was to be getting like words on the page. You know what I mean? So if you're getting words on the page, I think it's kind of like, it's a double-edged sword insofar as that it's, you know, getting people productive, which is great, but then also guilting people about their productivity.
Yeah, it's also it goes back to the process versus the process oriented versus goal oriented, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You're working the process, and that's the fantastic thing. Even if you don't get to your goal, you work the process, and you produced and you created something that didn't exist before.
Yeah, because I don't try to do the daily word count thing. Isn't it like 10,000 words or something? It's something insane. And I'm like, you need like 10 hours to do it. I'm like, I work, like I have other things to do. Like I'll just try and at least sit down to do something. Like you said, even if it's a sentence, then that's fine.
Yeah. You know, think about the process over product. Any of these kinds of sociological reasons to be productive, I'm super in favor of. I mean, this is why I'm so a big believer in Culturama, you know, is that it's a sociological reason for writers and artists throughout Southern California and now the world. I mean, that's pretty awesome, John, to come together and to have a reason to think about their art, do art, get inspired for art for the rest of the year, and with a, you know, 100% success rate. Because if you're here and you're hearing this stuff, then you have a reason to be feeling good about yourself, and then doing whatever work later that you're doing, you know, that's a success rate. You're the victor over the blank page. And that's not the result of having like, what's their arbitrary stupid number for a minimum word count for a novel these days?
It's about, it's 50,000 words, which works out to 1,800 words a day.
1,800 words a day. Yeah. I think those are like arbitrary, you know, standards that are created by a publishing industry that have a certain utility to itself, but has nothing to do with art or why we should be writing in order to hit like abstract word counts. That's like greatest generation, you know, work ethic, you know, put in the time, put in the words, 100,000 words equals one novel, you know, that's crazy stuff.
I actually had a comment about NaNoWriMo too, because when I was in my sophomore year of high school, it was an assignment for me to write a novel in November, like as
Wow.
like each of
Yeah.
us as a student.
Yeah.
It was the prospect of it was like exciting, like, yay, I get to write a book in a month. But then by the end of it, I kept on lowering and lowering my word count because it was just getting too much. And then it was just like, this isn't fun anymore. I'm doing it every day, and it's a requirement because it's for school.
That's the
Yeah.
number one thing, right? It should be fun, right? If you're doing it, it shouldn't be a job. It's like, there are jobs, but your art should not be that with those same feelings, you know, that you have to the job.
Yeah. And I mean, it being school just made it less fun. So
Yeah.
School can be fun. We're big believers in that. We've got like a whole lifetime that school can be dedicated.
being community college is fun. High school, not so much.
Sure. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
College.
Also, Andrea, part of the problem is you're putting too many expectations on yourself. I think you're expecting to be perfect.
Well, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Be good to yourself. You know what I mean? Be happy. That's what victory. When you put something on a page that wasn't there before, that's like awesome. You know what? I used to think like if I wasn't doing a whole like page, like finished page of an illustration that I was going to be putting out on Instagram or in the next book or something, that it was like a failure of an illustration or that I wasted time or something, you know? No way, man. Since I've been training at the Kubert School, I've rediscovered so many different attitudes and ways to go about your art. One of the things, like I think is a good example here when you think about productivity, is a little picture called a thumbnail. And they're little tiny pictures of what will be a full page of illustrations, you know? And you just do this little primitive sketch of scratching out what the shapes will be, and it looks like shit and nobody's ever going to see it, and that's for you, but I can look at it and be like, oh man, that's going to be an awesome page, and it gets me excited to go and do it. You know what I mean? Like it's an outline that you have ready for yourself and ready to go. So to kind of like, you know, create parameters for yourself where you can have different varieties of victories, of different varieties of ways that you can be doing your art and feeling good about it. Like if I'm writing in my idea book, that counts, as opposed to if I'm writing script for, you know, my graphic novel, that also counts, but it's just work in different places, you know?
Yeah.
I want to put out something else out there too. Writer's block was mentioned. And the idea about the writing process is as important as it is to write, I find it's just as important not to write. And what I mean by that is go take a friggin' walk. You know, if you're stuck on something, you're not going to hammer it out physically. You know, you can't pull it out there if you're stressing about it. Sometimes not thinking about it means you're taking this problem, this conundrum that you have in your work, and you're handing it over to the subconscious. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a good idea in the shower when I wasn't even thinking of my book, but something would just come from God, basically. You know, the muse would hit me in the shower, and I couldn't wait to get out of the shower to write down what I just thought of, because it fixed everything that was going wrong in my story. So don't get too fixated on the process of writing. Take a break once in a while. I think most authors do that. A lot of them work out specifically because it causes them to get away from their writer's brain for a little while.
Yeah, I would also even just say, I think I may have said this already, but I think thinking about writing is also part of that process. You know, if I'm driving and I don't have the time to write because I'm driving, but I'm thinking about a poem idea or a story idea, I'm letting it percolate in my head. That's part of the work. That's part of the process, and it's an important part of the process. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dan.
And look at the conditions right now. Look at the unnatural world conditions. You know? All right, John, I gotta blow up again. So okay, so right now, no, because we're all artists, we're all together right now, okay? So right now, in America and in the rest of the world, we are facing an unprecedented time, not because of the pandemic, because of the putting on hold of culture, putting on hold of the vestiges of civilization. What do you look at and see that a civilization is of, you know, advanced civilization by its art productions, okay, by its cultural places that people can go together and come together in community and see art, like go to the movies or go to a museum or go to, you know what I mean? Like go to not your job, but go to some place where you can experience art together with strangers or with loved ones or with whoever. And this is what marks a civilization. And this has stopped for this past year. This has stopped. This never happened before, but we are being cut off from our community of you know, other people. And we're being cut off from places of coming together with those other people, you know, in physical, actual spaces. So this is an unprecedented time, you know, that we're not going to be encountering likely again in our lifetime. So what can you get out of this time of culture pause? You know, what can you get out from yourself to fill that void in the place where you are? That's bonus. You know what I mean? That's pure victory, whatever you can get out of these circumstances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We might have time for one more question, but I definitely want to give some prompts so that people can start working on their own. Does anybody have a quick question or comment? Yeah, Nicole.
And just out of curiosity, what could you provide in terms of editing creativity, working on producing a movie or something like that, for ways to be creative during the editing process?
Oh, well, I can't talk about movies. Robert can in a moment. I'm going to talk about writing for a little bit, and I think it probably applies. When people complain, they say they don't like to revise their writing. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think when I'm revising my story, I really get into it. I enjoy it. I write poetry too, and I start to treat each paragraph, each section as its own poem, right? And I try to draw out the beauty and the music of that thing. And in other words, I'm enjoying the writing process, the editing process as a creative process, right? What more can I do? I asked myself in a journal, what was I trying to achieve there? And did I achieve it? Was I successful? And if not, why not? And where do I need to go? And so it becomes very, very poetic. At least I hope it becomes poetic. The process becomes poetic, right? And I'm like, oh man, I've revised this much, and it just feels so good. It feels like I've come to a higher level of consciousness through that editing process. I've gotten to that new place. Now, you asked specifically about movie making, and we have one movie maker here. Robert, you did that.
Yeah. With regard to editing, my experience of editing a film. So, are you an editor, Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So one of the things that I've found is that editing can be something where you spend hours and hours and hours at the console. One of the things about the process of editing is that you are having to manipulate time, the length of each shot, okay, or the sound elements. So you're manipulating elements within time. And so part of the artistry of manipulating elements within time is that you will necessarily become unstuck in time. So you'll lose track of time, of how long it's been. And so what I've noticed is that editors tend to get exhausted physically and mentally, and they don't even know it because they're lost in it. So I would recommend giving scheduled breaks, forcing yourself to eat or to drink or to step away, go take a walk, get away from the editing console, to resituate yourself in time periodically, to reground yourself. That's one of the primary things that I would say. Maintain your physical body when you're in that editing suite. And also with regard to the creativity behind how to approach a cut, I'm a big believer in having different versions, radically different versions of a scene. You have the one that's constructed the way you think it was going to be, or the way that director thinks it was going to be. And then as you're working on that, if you get frustrated or you come to a roadblock, then to take a completely different approach to it than you were planning for, the wrong cut, and that can be great to get your creativity going and sparking, and you'll think about things in a way you never would have before if you were trying to do something purposely wrong that you were looking to do. Is that helpful, Nikel?
Yes, it does. It's really helpful because I've been editing, and you get more focused. And like you said, you spend lots of hours, and self-care and really deciding on a break will give my mind a break itself and to process while I'm resting. And that will help with the continued process. You've given me a lot to think about. I appreciate that.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay. Our next event is going to happen in the same Zoom room. So if you want to just hang out, that's great. Just hang out. And I'll certainly be hanging out if you have questions. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but I'll be here talking to you if you like. But I wanted to give a prompt that you can take with you. And I'm going to give one. I'm going to allow any of the other leaders to give one as well. So my prompt is one that I do very, very often. It's just a great way to get yourself started writing. I want you to write a little bit of a vignette. And it's going to be a nonfiction vignette. Now, a vignette is just a piece of writing that's not burdened by story. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It's just a flash slice of life sort of thing, right? You're just writing it to whatever it is. That's what it is. And we're going to work from memory for this one. I'm about to say something, and you're going to not hear what I'm saying. You're going to hear something different. I want you to think about the first time that you can remember being outside by yourself. Not the first time that you were outside by yourself, the first time you remember being outside by yourself. That's a different thing, right? It could have happened when you were 63. It could have happened when you were 7. It doesn't matter. Just the first time you remember being outside by yourself, and write that down. Write what that experience was like. Now, probably something just occurred to you, some event. Write that event. There's a reason that came to your mind. There was something wonderful, something difficult, something big that happened at that moment. The first time that I can remember, the one that always comes to my mind, I was an American child, but we were living in Canada, and Canada was the only world that I knew at that time. And we were going to move to the exotic world, this distant, far land called Pittsburgh that sounded so exotic. And I was just outside waiting for my parents, and like, okay, Pittsburgh, here we go. I don't know if it's a world of jungles or what it is. It could be a desert, it could be a forest, it could be a city. I don't know. Let's go. And so that was a big thing for me, right? That's the reason that comes to my mind. But it could be that you remember something when you were 20, right? It could, whatever that is, just write that out. And takes you 15 minutes, maybe. It gets you started. Okay. Does anybody else? Melissa, do you have a prompt? I don't know if artists work.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If you want to do something with the visual arts, go pull up a mirror, set a timer, and in 10 minutes, draw a self-portrait of yourself.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah. How about other people here? Lloyd, do you have a prompt?
I always have that moment when you ask me this, because you ask me this a lot. It feels like I'm back in school and I don't know the answer to the question. No, I don't.
I'll give 2 prompts. How about you, Robert?
Oh, John, you're putting us on the spot. We didn't know we had to have homework prepared.
I know,
right?
Absolutely. My chief
I have sketches.
I couldn't copy off of Robert.
I have sketches. I know. I have sketches that I have my fiction writing students do, so I'm always ready with sketches. I'm a big believer in kind of like the abstract scenario. So if you're wanting to do some character work, 2 people who do not want to be stuck in an elevator together.
That's good.
That's a great prompt, because you don't have to talk about the setting or the stuff. You have to focus on body language. You have to focus on dialogue. You can go into the
the psychology of the two characters if you like, but when you put two people under pressure and there's nothing that they can do about to change their immediate situation, they can really show you who they are and what they're about. So that's what, two people trapped in an elevator.
Okay, so that's good. With 3 prompts, I'm going to give one to Robert right now. We're going to ascribe this to Robert. There's a woman who's the most important woman in your life right now. Right about that moment when you realize she was the most important woman in your life.
I could tell you that. I'll tell you that right now.
Tell me that.
I remember that I was with Mally's mother, and she was pregnant with Mally, and she was having an ultrasound done, and I found out that it was a girl, and I started tearing up and totally terrified because I was scared that she wouldn't like me, that I would have a daughter and that she wouldn't like me as like a person.
Oh my God.
But when she was born, oh my God, it was love at first sight. We've just been so connected and close ever since. But I could still remember that vividly about like, oh shit, what if she doesn't like me?
Well, I know what you have to write in the next half hour, man.
I actually do have to go, unfortunately.
Okay.
I have a class I have to teach, but I'm going to be popping into Culturama the whole weekend. I wanted to thank everybody for showing up to our opening of Culturama. It's been such a pleasure and honor to be here and get to speak with all of you, and I'm very excited for your workshops and to learn with all of you this weekend and future weekends. So thank you all for your attention today.
Thank you.
I'm going to
Thank you all. I think that we've reached the end of our hour and a half. I'm going to stay in the room if you'd like to chat, or and I think Scott is next, and I'll see y'all throughout the weekend or throughout the month.
All right. Thank you.
See you guys.
John, we could do one of those art installation projects where we're just on Zoom for a year straight.
I feel I've already almost completed that, right?
I'll write the grant. And